welcome to Brand X Reviews, and welcome to the third BXR mailbag video that I've done. BXR mailbag is something I started new for 2015, where viewers, or my regular viewers, all 3 or 4 of them, can come onto the website or the YouTube page or the YouTube channel, the Facebook page, all that stuff, post questions, and so far we've had a lot of the same people contributing to it. So this one is done by Paul Cage, who did the last 2. Now his last 2 were Marvel related, but this one's a bit of a different one. This one's Terminator related. Now the thing is with this, I tend to be doing this thing because I tend to listen to a lot of what writers and producers of films have to say when something's coming out. There's a lot of stuff coming out at the moment, and when things get announced, particularly when trailers come out, it leads to a lot of questions, and I think that's kind of what's prompted this one. So let's see what Paul had to say. Explain the current timeline from Terminator 1 through 4, and how do you think Terminator 5 will alter this, and what is your opinion on how it looks in each film, please? Oh man, do I have to really get into the Terminator timeline? It's not something that I can really explain because it is messy, seriously. And that doesn't really take away whether the films are good or not. It happens to the best of film series. I mean, look at James Bond, for example. You try to explain why in GoldenEye 95, M is the new M, played by Judi Dench. She's a woman. James Bond has been around since the Cold War, that is said literally. And then when they rebooted it with Daniel Craig, soft rebooted as such, but you still got Judi Dench as M, but she has been around for a long time, and James Bond is the new 007, and James Bond is James Bond. It's not like different men with the same name. That's not what it's supposed to be. Try explaining that, and that is an awesome film series. So when I'm kind of griping about this, the reason I mention this is, don't let you think that I'm slating the film for that. It's just something that naturally occurs when you do sequels. Plenty of other examples. Rocky, for example. Rocky 4, he goes to Russia. His son is, 7 years old on average. He comes back and his son is, pretty much, 13. So was he away for 6 years? I don't think so. It's just what happens. So, anyway, your question is, how does it all fit together? Well, if you watch my Terminator retrospective that I did in late 2013, you'll see kind of me talking about the first 4 films, and also the Machinima series, which is kind of a film as well, tie-in with Terminator Salvation, albeit it's an animated deal. So you can kind of, I got into it a bit there, but I'll kind of go over it on this. So, the first Terminator film, it was released in 1984, and I'm pretty sure that was the year that it's supposed to be set. We know that it was May. May, was it 12th? Because there's that bit where he's in the alleyway and asks the policeman what the date is. So that was May.
What day is it? The date?
12th, May, Thursday.
What year?
So John Connor was conceived in May 1984, so he would have been born in early 1985. Now, Terminator 2 came out in 1991. So if that film was set when it was made, if John Connor was born in 85, having been conceived the year before, he would be 6 at the time of Terminator 2. Now, clearly he is not 6 when you watch that film. He could be double that, at least. So I don't really figure that Terminator 1 is set in 91. You would have to kind of say, well, okay, it was made in 91, but maybe it was set a few years later. Well, we know that Judgment Day happens in 1997, so I don't get the sense that Terminator 2 is set that close to Judgment Day. I got the feeling that it was a bare minimum a year or 2 before Judgment Day. So let's just say maybe T2 was set in 95, maybe 96, but it's pushing it. John Connor would still have to be 10 or 11, but that's better than saying that he's 6 anyway. But again, you're not really supposed to think about it. It was just, we didn't want to have a little kid in there. We wanted kind of a streetwise guy who's a bit older and, can kind of give the film a bit more attitude that it needed. So it was a great decision, a great casting decision, absolutely fine. So yeah, that's one sort of timeline issue. I don't know exactly when Terminator 2 is supposed to be set. Now obviously they change things in that film. They change future history, which kind of sounds a bit weird, but if you've seen the film, you'll understand what I mean by that. And that therefore meant that, well, if you watch the second film, you just kind of thought, well, Judgment Day is not going to happen anymore. Well, they had to make a sequel and kind of ruin that. So they said, well, Judgment Day does happen, it just didn't happen in 97. It's now been postponed by 6 years to 2003. Now we know that is when the new Judgment Day is. We'll refer to it as New Judgment Day, that as a result of changing the future in Terminator 2. So New Judgment Day, as seen in Terminator 3, set in 2003, which was the year it was released. And we know it's set in 2003 because it says that in the film. So at that point, well, okay, so we know John Connor was born in 85. So by 2003, the events of Terminator 3, he should be 18. So I kind of buy that, I guess. It maybe looks a little bit older, maybe in his early 20s. But okay, he's supposed to be 18, whatever. I'll kind of go with that. It's better than what it was in the previous film. But granted, the previous film is a lot better. I'm not disputing that. But yeah, so that's kind of where they went with that. Now, there are a few other little things. One thing I would mention about Terminator 3 in terms of its relevance with the timeline, they do mention the death of Sarah Connor. There's that scene where they go into the graveyard and there's like a giant crypt. And there's a coffin which you believe has got Sarah Connor's body, and it's actually a load of guns, but I'm sure you know that from having seen the film. But they talk about Sarah Connor's death anyway, and John Connor basically says something along the lines of, after the events of Terminator 2, I mean, he doesn't say that word for word because that'd be a bit weird, but after the events of what happened in that film, Sarah Connor was diagnosed with leukemia and battled on for quite a long time, until she could see out Judgment Day 97 to make sure that it didn't happen, which she did. So she survived Judgment Day, and she said something along the lines of, you know, every day from now on is a gift kind of thing. So that kind of makes me wonder, because they're saying that there was a few years between Terminator 2 and Judgment Day in 97. Well, there goes my theory that that's set in like 95 or 96 then, I guess. Maybe it was supposed to be set in 91, but then it can't be set in 91 because John Connor wasn't 6. He was older than that, and he was born in 85, so... Sorry, Paul, you asked. You wanted me to explain this. If you're not following this, try being in my seat, man. So that was something that came out in Terminator 3. The next film, Terminator Salvation, or Terminator 4, let's call it that, was an alternate timeline again. Like I say, the events of Terminator 2 postponed Judgment Day from 97 to 2003, which is when the new Judgment Day happened. Terminator 4 / Salvation was set in 2018, came out in 2009, but it was set in 2018, so that's 15 years after the events of Terminator 3. Now, it's obviously an alternate future to what we saw in the flashback, flash-forward sequences in Terminator 1 and 2, maybe even 3, I guess. The future that you saw in that, it was obviously the future, but it was futuristic in a basic theme, in that it was like plasma weapons and all that kind of stuff. The kind of weapons you don't see in modern-day warfare as such, well, as far as I know anyway. The weapons that you saw in Terminator Salvation, it was bullets, it was knives, it was grenades, you know, typical traditional weaponry that we have in the real world. So that, I think a lot of people didn't gel with it because they expected this like futuristic, you know, as we saw in the other films. Well, for whatever reason they didn't do that, but it makes sense because at this stage the war with the machines not only has lost 6 years of age with the change of the time, but it's 2018. I think those sequences that you saw in Terminator 1 and 2, those future sequences, were set in the late 2020s. I can't remember if it was 2027 or 29, but anyway, Terminator Salvation is set in 2018, so it's early on in the war, so they haven't got all those weapons yet. They're only just learning about the existence of the T-800, which is the Arnold Schwarzenegger Terminator, also known as a T-101, but I think they refer to it as a T-800. So yeah, that's where that fits in with the timeline anyway. But for whatever reason, my thoughts about Terminator Salvation aside, well, I'll say it, I liked Terminator Salvation in its own right, but you can see my opinions on the other video that I did back in 2013. Yeah, my thoughts about that aside, the film didn't do too well critically or financially, and I think the company that made it, produced it, whatever. I think it was called the Halcyon Company or something. I think I'd heard they'd had financial difficulties, maybe went bust, I'm not quite sure about that, but for whatever reason, that led to the sequels to that not being made, because that was pretty much a reboot. Terminator Salvation, it was a new Terminator series. From what I heard at the time, it was going to be a new trilogy. They obviously didn't have Arnold Schwarzenegger around because he was off being governor of California, and they had Christian Bale on board to play John Connor, but that trilogy went nowhere. We only have the one film, so they've rebooted it again this year with Terminator Genesis, which is the 5th cinematic film in this. I'm not quite sure when I think the film will be set in the late 2020s to start with, where you're going to have the future war. You've got pretty much what we expected. If you just come out of watching the first 2 films, you could probably leap forward to Terminator Genesis, I imagine, in terms of what you expect, who these characters are and what their motives are when they go back in time. Because the Terminator goes back in time to kill Sarah Connor in 1984. That's the Terminator that went back, the original film. So John Connor sends back Kyle Reese back into 1984, expecting to find Sarah Connor to be just an ordinary female living in 1984, doesn't know what she's doing in life, isn't in any way... she can't take care of herself, basically, in a fight. But from what the trailer shows, he goes back in time expecting to find that kind of meek woman. Doesn't find that at all. In fact, she ends up saving him. She's pretty much the Sarah Connor that we saw in Terminator 2, the one that has been kind of trained in military ways and all that kind of stuff, and use of weaponry, all that kind of stuff. And this is in 1984, so you think, like, what the hell? What's happened to her? How in the hell is she, like, at this point in the timeline, all knowledgeable about stuff and, well-hard? What's going on there? Well, what's happened is Terminator has gone back even further, so I'm thinking maybe late 60s, early 70s, because you can see this in the trailer. You see for a few seconds the back of what looks like Arnie carrying a little girl away, which I'm assuming is Sarah Connor at a young age. So something has kind of gone back further than has ever gone before to change things, which has changed everything. So I'm assuming that she is now grown up from being a little girl with the Terminator or whatever, and he's taught her about the future and basically brought her to the point where she was in Terminator 2, but he's brought her to that point in Terminator 1 now, so in the 80s, so she's pretty much tough and can deal with it all. And that is pretty much where a lot of the film takes place. Now, I was going to say I don't know if it's all going to be set in the 80s. I think it might kind of leap forward, but an obvious question with this film, how in the hell does Arnold Schwarzenegger, at his age, play a Terminator because he's really old? Well, James Cameron had said this in an interview, that he had actually spoken to, I think it was the writers or whatever, the people that were doing the new Terminator film, and he just said to them, well, I always had this concept where if a Terminator had gone back, although he's a robot, the skin is organic and that skin will age. So if that Terminator's been around for a few decades or a couple of decades, he's gonna look old, but he'll still be very tough. So they've kind of sent a Terminator back in time, like, pretty far. So then when he's caught up, he's been kind of hanging around for a couple of decades at least and has aged. So, I mean, you could even say, like, maybe the aging process is slightly extended with these cyborgs, I don't know. You could do that. But, yeah, so that does explain a lot of where the timeline is. So, in the 80s, you've got Sarah Connor and Kyle Reese in a very different place to what we've seen them before. And they also use clips from the original Terminator. Because in the trailer, you'll see Kyle Reese says, well, what about the Terminator that they sent back to 1984 to kill you? And Sarah Connor says something along the lines of, oh, we took care of that guy. And Arnold Schwarzenegger, old Arnold Schwarzenegger, a good Terminator, is kind of facing off against the Terminator, using footage from the original Terminator film where he's naked, basically. And he's like, I've been expecting you, kind of thing. So it could work when the film comes out. It could also be just a lot of people standing up shouting, that's bullshit. and like walking out of the cinema. But we will see anyway. Now, I know if you watch the Jeremy Jans video, he pretty much said what I'm saying, in that sense that that's what we think's going on. But I mean, everybody's saying that because, like I say, if you've read what the filmmakers have been saying in interviews, and also James Cameron had said as well, if you watch a trailer, it's fairly self-apparent that that's where they're going. Another good point that Jeremy Jans said was, it's not just at this point going to be about, well, you need to save Sarah Connor. Those two, Kyle Reese and Sarah Connor, are going to have sex and conceive John Connor at this point, because if they don't do that, there's no point even saving her life. That's what they have to do. So is Arnie going to be some kind of like matchmaker? You know, is he going to have to sort things out? Because it's going to be part of his mission, basically, to put them together, because presumably that's going to be in his mandate, I guess, you know, make Kyle Reese and Sarah Connor have sex. So I just got a feeling that at some point in the film it's just gonna play out like this, basically.
Right, you, Kyle Reese, and you, Sarah Connor, you get to have sex. So what I've done is I booked you a hotel room. It's very nice. It's a honeymoon suite. But remember, when you do have sex, don't use protection. That defeats the purpose. You don't need protection anyway. You've got me.
So yeah, I just think that would be awesome if they do that in the film. That would be like pretty funny, but I don't see that happening to me. I don't think they're going to be playing this for laughs. So, but we'll see anyway. We'll see what happens. That's pretty much my thoughts of it. Let me just go back to your question, because I'll make sure that there isn't any aspect of it that I've missed, because a lot of your questions, Paul, do seem to be kind of multifaceted. So we've explained the timeline, we've said how Terminator 5 will alter this. My opinion on how it looks, okay, you mentioned that, I haven't really got into that. It looks quite good, to be honest. I don't think it's going to be like in the top 5 best films of the year or anything like that, but I'm quite optimistic. I was very sceptical about this. I'd followed when they were, filming it and stuff like that, and tried to kind of get an idea of concept-wise what they're doing, but I couldn't really seem to. It wasn't until the trailer came out that I just thought, this actually looks pretty good. I've got a feeling it's going to be poorly received. I don't know, I just get that vibe. I can't really explain why. It's just something I kind of get a sense of, but I think it'd be quite good. And I think if they are doing what I think they're doing, like I say, with sending the Terminator back that far and he's aged as a result, that's quite clever, is that? And like I say, I've read that James Cameron came up with that idea. So James Cameron being the guy that created the whole Terminator thing anyway. I'm happy with that. There's nothing really about this that just looks bad. There's nothing that I can sort of see from the trailer where I'm just thinking, oh, that's terrible. I mean, maybe the casting, I can't pronounce his name, is it Jai Courtney, who does mostly bad films, from what I understand. I mean, not Terminator 5, Die Hard 5, terrible film, and he played John McClane's son. He wasn't bad in it. He was actually quite good. He looks, quite the part for an action film. Can't really fault him. But, yeah, he's done a lot of kind of rubbishy films. And the guy that plays John Connor as well, I've seen in other things, but he's not exactly Christian Bale, let's just put it that way. He's not that kind of leading man. But I don't think John Connor's going to be in the film a lot. I think they're just going to he'll be in the beginning of the film, and then it's just going to be left to it. Otherwise, I think they would have gone for a Christian Bale level actor. But that's pretty much it anyway. I could ramble on. I think I've pretty much covered exactly what you wanted to know, and I could be very wrong about a lot of this as well. So if I am, don't blame me when the film comes out. This is just based on what's going around at the time, based on what's in the trailer. So I will leave it there. So if there's anything else, if anybody watching this wants to leave questions, as I say, you can go to brandxreviews.com. There is also a link on there which will lead you to the other social media pages. I'll say that there's only 2. There's YouTube, which you'll be watching this on, and also there's a Facebook page as well. So if you want to pose a question, just post it on either the website, Facebook, or YouTube, and we'll get around to doing a video as and when. So I hope you got plenty out of that anyway, and we'll see when Terminator Genisys comes out if it's any good or not. So for now, I will leave it there. Thank you very much for watching.